It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Then Lord Simon Peter replied, "Not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has a bath needs only to wash his feet, for his whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I am Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." 31:35. When he had gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, just as I told the Jews. So I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Amen. So this evening, on this Good Friday, I want to talk about the power of love. The power of love. Everything I read to you here this evening indicates that, does it not? Where Jesus said he loved his own, and he showed them that extension of his love. It's just, to me, it's amazing how much God really loves each and every one of us. Isn't it though? I mean, I say it so many times, we don't deserve it. But God's love, he loves us so much that he does not want us to face destruction and hell. He doesn't want us to do that. And that's why he sent his Son, Jesus Christ, into this world. Now, I don't know how many realize this, but John's gospel is the only one who tells of this event, of the foot washing event. He's the only one. There has to be a reason why he was the only one. And my conclusion was, there's two thoughts that I had. Number one, John was there. John was there. He experienced that. In John's gospel, several times he says, he indicates he is the disciple that Jesus loved. And so when Jesus showed this expression of love to his disciples, it must have overwhelmed him. And I think that's why he recorded it the way he did. Yeah. He was there. He's seen it all. And I think he wanted the rest of humanity to read what Jesus did to his disciples. And so that's why he recorded it the way he did. So it tells us here that after the meal was over, and what they were doing, they were celebrating the Passover feast, which was a tradition for the Jews. They celebrated it every year around this time, and that was based on the moon, the full moon, I believe it was. But anyhow, this was the last Passover feast that Jesus would experience here on earth. And I think he wanted to make a moment where they would never forget. And I think he certainly did. But it says after the meal was over, he took his outer garment off. It was kind of like a robe that they wore. They had undergarments, and then it said he wrapped a towel around him. Then it says he began to wash his disciples' feet. We have images of the 12 disciples sitting at a table, but actually it wasn't a table like we're accustomed to. They would sit down and recline. And I kind of envisioned that their feet were sticking out under this table or platform. And Jesus went around and he started washing their feet one by one and drying their feet. Now, foot washing to the Jews wasn't nothing uncommon. It was a common practice. Every time a guest would come into the household, there was either a servant there or the lady of the house, or perhaps the older daughters would wipe or wash that guest's feet. It was their tradition. It was a way of showing hospitality. But you got to understand the shoes that they wore. They were not really shoes. I equate them to flip-flops. They just had a leather sole or bottom with straps to hold them on. And they didn't have these nice paved highways like we do today. It was all dirt road. So can you imagine how dirty their feet would get? Or if it was raining, how muddy? So when they come into a house, they got their feet washed. So they were accustomed to that. Well, let's get back to what Jesus was doing. I think it just dumbfounded them. They couldn't believe this guy that they followed for about 3 years. He was washing their feet. Of course, we know when it comes to Peter, Peter's the outspoken guy, Peter's the one who has a tendency to speak without thinking. Sometimes we all do that, right? The lips are engaged, but the brain is not. Okay? That was Peter. I love it, though. He was just so outspoken. Lord, you're not going to wash my feet. think he responded that way? My personal thought is because he realized that Jesus was the Son of God. He's seen all the miracles, all 12 of them did. The signs and the wonders. They've seen all this, raising people from the dead, calming the storm, walking on water. Peter says, no, Lord, you're not going to wash my feet. I think there was another occasion where Peter, when he first had an encounter with Jesus, and Jesus, at one time at the beginning of his ministry, he asked Peter and his brother Andrew if he could use his fishing boat for like a platform or a stage so he could address the crowd off to the Sea of Galilee. And so they consented. And then after Jesus was done teaching the crowd, Jesus told Peter and Andrew, go out and cast your nets. And so they did. And they caught a bunch of fish. They were biting good that day because of Jesus. Anyhow, when Peter saw the catch of fish, he knelt down and just, Jesus, away from me, I am not worthy. So that, to me, is saying that he realized that Jesus truly was the Son of God, and he was not worthy to have him do that. But we know Jesus rebuked Peter. I don't know how much of a rebuke it was, but he says, Peter, if you don't allow me to do this, you're telling me you have no part with me. You don't want any part with me. And Peter, okay, Lord, not only my feet, but my hands and my head, wash me all over. He was so glad after he learned what Jesus was doing, that he allowed him to wash his feet. And the reason that Jesus rebuked him, because Jesus wants submission and service from his disciples. Submission and service. And Peter, he allowed him to do that. Now, in these verses I read to you, there's two lessons that we can all learn from this. First of all, first lesson is Jesus wants his followers to be in a humble act of service. Humble act of service. Right? Isn't that what he was telling his disciples? I gave you an example. I want you to go out and wash other people's feet. Not literally. He didn't mean that. He meant go out and serve others. Not only as church within the church, but out in the world as well. I couldn't help but think, when Jesus was washing their feet, it made me think as though that God came down and was washing humanity's feet. Here you have Jesus, the Son of God. And one thing about Jesus, he was humble. He never demanded anybody ever bow down to him, did he? I've never read it in the Gospels. He was a humble individual. He never elevated himself above anybody else. Here in verse 15 and 16 it says, I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who sent greater than he who sent me. The other lesson, maybe I'll have three. We shouldn't think that we're better than anybody else, right? None of us are better than anybody else. There's been rare times that I've come across some Christians who just kind of look down their noses at people on the outside who are not Christians. And, they just look down on them. They think that they're better than they are. And we're not. We should never think that way. The only difference between them and us is that we're sinners saved by grace, right? And how are you going to draw somebody into the light if you're going to look down at them? Think about what Jesus did. He came and he ate with tax collectors and sinners. Oh my word! That evil man. But that was another lesson. We should never look down on anybody. Amen? Amen. Okay, lesson number 2. Jesus commands us to love one another. Ouch. Verses 34-35, Jesus gives this new command. He says, that I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. I highlighted, all will know that you are my disciples. A disciple is a follower of Jesus Christ, a learner. That's what the word disciple means. So here again, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago about loving one another, especially those of us in the church. Sometimes church people don't love one another, right? How many stories have you heard? Churches, there's arguments, disagreements. I want it red carpeting, not blue. I'm going to take my ball and go home. That's sad. There's always been disagreement in churches. If it's theological agreement, okay. I think it's all right to separate. But if it's petty little issues like that, come on. My thought is, what kind of message are you sending to people out in the world? Well, so-and-so church, they just can't get along. They're a bunch of hypocrites. That's a wrong message to send. We have to love one another. Yes, we're going to have disagreements, but aren't we adult enough to work them out? Huh? Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. I maintain, and I think I said, if a church is not getting along, you might as well just shut the doors, because you're just definitely sending the wrong message out in the world. Definitely. Jesus laid it down. You are to love one another. That way the rest will know that you are my disciple. And love people in the world too. So, what is the power of love all about? Well, serving our fellow man and loving each other, but I added this later, most of all, loving God. What was the commandment that Jesus said? The greatest of all, love your neighbor as yourself. And also love the Lord your God with all your being, your heart, your mind, and your soul. That just sums it all up. Being in service to others. If you truly love others, you're going to go out and serve them, to help them in any way you can. And you're going to show the love of Christ, hoping that their lives will be transformed. Amen. Now this evening, we're going to do something a little bit different. I don't think I ever did this in this church before. I did a devisal years ago. So we're going to have our communion table that's set. I asked Howard and Kay to serve the elements after I bless, okay? Then also, once you take the elements, you just walk over here, and I'm going to wash your hands, and Diane will dry your hands. I thought about the foot washing, okay? I knew I'd get that response. Some of you look like he's going to have a heart attack. But, you know, a lot of us anymore nowadays, we work more with our hands, right? And so I just want you to envision what Jesus was doing. Now, I'm far, far, far below Jesus, but think about what Jesus did. It was a humbling act. So, yeah, just think about it.